Hello, today I'd like to discuss fridges and freezers, their functions and the way to actually maintain the coldness within the freezer should you have a power cut or possibly envisage a power cut in the future. Say if you're in a stormy area, like there's a summer storm or something like that. So basically what you have to work on is the fact that these days freezers, namely one of these discussing today is chest freezers, which are the way they're actually built with the cold will always actually remain inside the actual freezer because it doesn't pour out like a sideways opening one. But essentially the tips and points I'll be making today are pretty much applicable to any freezer really. But essentially what you're trying to do is to maintain thermal mass. Thermal mass is something within the freezer which would actually hold the cold in it. So like if you see it's kind of like a battery. Okay, so what you do if you actually to keep the coldness in the freezer essentially is one tip to do is to actually kind of like have bottles of water that fill them about 3/4 full and stick them in the freezer. Just make sure that the soda bottles, if anyone drinks soda drinks, they're particularly hard bottles, probably go with these rather than milk jugs or anything like that, because this one actually is an iced tea one, but essentially the main ones you actually want to use are kind of old soda bottles. They're quite tough plastic, you can pretty much drop them from any height, they don't split, so they're used to being under some kind of pressure with the having like bubbles in it anyway, you see. Essentially when you actually freeze those in the freezer, you are storing coldness within the actual kind of freezer itself. These days with the energy saving kind of theme going on with people trying to cut back on the amount of energy they actually kind of use in the home and stuff, the fridges and freezers are built somewhat differently to what they were built before. So they're built with the compressor which wouldn't be running as long. So the difference between the old fridges and freezers is that the compressor will be running constantly and they would have not as much insulation. These days it's the other way around, so there's a lot of insulation built into the freezers and the compressor runs less, so it uses less electricity, and because of this fact you can use it as a glorified storage box for the coldness. It will hold the cold in for a lot longer. So essentially by filling up your freezer with anything, but essentially the bottles, as long as there's a frozen bottle within the freezer, means that all the coldness hasn't disappeared. Obviously you want to move the stuff that has any dairy or eggs or whatever. You want to finish those things first because they can go pretty rancid pretty quickly. But essentially if you have your freezer just and you know that the power is either gone or it's going to be cut off at some point, you want to unplug the freezer, put like all your blankets on it over the top so that it actually holds in a lot of the actual kind of the coldness in there. It's just cold can be kept in just like heat can be kept in, so you want to cover that up with some kind of extra insulation. Okay, so essentially this is what I've got. I've filled a few of these bottles in here. I've actually cut down the amount that I actually have, but as you can see, you might be able to see down the bottom, there's quite a few in there, and that would actually hold the coldness in for a good few days actually. People often think that as soon as the power goes, the cold just disappears and everything has to be thrown away, but as long as you're sensible, use the old sniffer if you're not sure, and if you've got stuff that's defrosting in there, then the best thing to do is just to take it out and cook it. Another kind of thing that's I actually use with this idea in mind is I don't actually own a fridge myself, but what I do is I cycle the frozen bottles which I have in my freezer into an esky, or what do you call it, a cooler in America. So essentially that's my makeshift fridge. I just every morning, and depending on the heat as well, I just cycle round one frozen bottle in there, possibly more depending on the actual the heat in the day, if I know it's going to be a pretty hot one, and as long as that thing there is frozen, then it's all good to go. You can have your dairies, there's mayonnaise in there that's never gone off. I've never gotten sick from storing it like that. if I was to add extra insulation to that that esky, it would actually make it last even longer, the coldness in there, so I could actually get some foam padding and stick it round if I was so inclined. I just don't have the space, or can I be bothered to do it right at the moment, but yeah, that's another way that I could actually build up the insulation on there. If you were looking to find out more information, because most of my stuff is actually from a guy called Stephen Harris, who's like an expert in the field of energy and lots of sciencey stuff and basic preparedness, which you should essentially kind of use every day. If you want to look at more stuff in relation to this and many other subjects, if you go to www.solar1234, there's a lot of other sites that are kind of linked to that one, but that's essentially his first site. Then if you go to that one, it will lead you to a few other ones, a few other places. Okay, well that's pretty much all for today, and hope that's helped some of you, and I shall speak to you soon.